Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to Tiny Keyhole Minis. If you're new here, I'm Jolene, and I am creating a 1930s farmhouse called the Josephine House. And next on my to-do list for the Josephine House is to work on this hallway. You see the mop there because I want to try and create a leaking ceiling. And when I say try, it's because I'll be doing something for the first time and I'm not really sure if it's going to work out. I'm also going to create a faux pull down ladder that will be sitting in that back corner on the ceiling, and the ladder part will be in the same area in the attic. But before I get to doing that, I need to redo this whole side wall, the wall that goes along the steps and down into the living room. I want to create another shiplap wall. It's going to be a different shiplap wall from the sewing room, but I see a shiplap wall there, and then going up the wall along the stairs will be the portrait wall of the family photos. Today I thought I would begin with the first miniature that's going to be sitting in the hallway, and that's going to be a gossip chair. I've been wanting to make one for a very long time now. You can call it a gossip table, a gossip bench, but I'm going to call it a gossip chair, and it is because I will be using this Bentley House Minis kit to create the gossip chair. This is Aira's cat ear chair kit, and I'm going to put a link in the description box below for this kit. I love Aira's kits. They're super easy to do. They're beginner friendly, and she also does a tutorial for each one of her kits. So you'll get instructions, or you can go on to the YouTube channel that supports her kits and you can watch it. I'm a visual learner, so I really appreciate that. But I'm going to modify this chair into the gossip chair, and I'm going to use additional mat board that I have saved from previous kits. The kits are laser cut with mat board, and this panel creates one whole chair, so you actually need all these pieces for one chair, but the kit comes with two chairs. So I've been wanting to do this since I purchased the kit, and it's been on my list for a long time now. Along with this, you'll get a piece of cardstock. Most of her kits come with a cardstock piece that has additional accessories that you can add to your kit. This one is for the cushion. So if you want to make a cushion for your chair, you can use this cardstock as a backboard and build your cushion on top of it. So today I'm going to be winging it. I started planning it out, and then I just got lazy and said, you know what, I'm just going to dive right into it. So this might be a disaster. It's definitely going to be one of those projects where I'm going to have to use a lot of brain work, which sometimes begins to hurt. But I'll get there in the end, tiny friends, I promise. So her instructions comes with one side that has photos, and then on the other side it's written instructions. So if you're a visual learner like myself, you'll appreciate how she does her instructions. So thank you so much, Aira, for thinking of us visual learners that don't really like to read a lot. I always pull out instructions, look at the pictures, and build from that. You'll also get a cotton round. Most of our kits come with a cotton round so that you can wipe off any additional ash left over from the cut. And then this kit comes with two toothpicks that will be used as support bars for the chair. Here are the additional pieces of mat board. This was from a previous kit that I used. It was the Hall Tree kit. So I just thought it would be more cohesive if I stuck with all mat board instead of adding wood as well. So if you haven't used any of her kits or purchased any of her kits, go and do so. They're super fun. Go purchase one of her kits and make something. You'll love it, I promise. So I'm going to get started with this kit because I have to think about how I'm going to do this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is cut my pieces out, and it'll be a little easier to rearrange them and try and figure out what I need to do. My advice is to always start with a sharp blade. I actually broke two blades creating this chair, so I need to desperately go get some because I think I'm on my last blade now. But they're super easy to cut through. There's only a couple tabs on each piece, and you just cut through the tabs, and then they just pop right out. Once you get your pieces out, it's totally up to you whether you want to use the cotton round just to wipe off around the edges. Sometimes there's ash residue on there. If you don't mind, don't worry about it. I'm just showing you for the video. I really don't mind either way. Everything I make gets aged and dirty and worn down anyways, so it's not a problem for me. You do want to be super careful, however, if you're working with the chair, because these legs are super thin and could easily break on you if you're too heavy-handed or if you're not handling with care. Um, until you get all the pieces together and all the glue added on, some parts of her kits are very, very delicate. So just take your time when working through one of these kits. So I have all my pieces cut out, and normally you're going to double the layers, and that's why there's two pieces of everything. And this helps strengthen the mat board since it's so thin. Right now, I'm just putting the pieces together so I can kind of figure out what I need to do and how I'm going to modify this. I do know, I'm pretty sure I know how I'm going to modify the seat part. Instead of doubling up the seat um, like you would do originally, I have to make a double seat because I have to make part, that goes underneath the table. So it's not going to be quite fully two of these seats. It's kind of going to be like a seat and a half. Originally, the legs on a gossip chair go on the sides, not front and back like you see in the original chair. So right now I'm just getting a visual of how this is going to work out, what it's going to look like as I put the legs on the side. So I'm going to be modifying the legs quite a bit. And I'm going to need to rearrange the leg placement. Okay, so for the seat part, I have sketched some marks out on where I think I may need to cut them down, but that could change before I'm committed to cutting. But I was thinking I would cut them down, glue them together to create one whole piece, and then I can go ahead and trace that whole piece on a mat board and create a double layer to have a stronger build, like Ara has intended when she designed this kit. Okay, before I do actually cut these pieces, I'm just going to trace one out just in case I mess up or it doesn't work out. I can then go ahead and cut this out and have a piece just like it. Before I cut, there's a tab on these that actually rest on the back of the chair. I'm going to need to keep one of those. And then these pieces are actually side supports, but I'm thinking about maybe using them for the front panel. So we'll see. Okay, so I didn't have to change my marks. I'm going to go ahead and commit with the cut and begin to cut these pieces down. And I'm just going to start a little bit at a time so this way, I can always cut more. I can never put it back. I'd have to start all over again with that piece that I traced out. But when you're modifying these kits, it's always a good idea to go ahead and trace your pieces out before changing them. So in case you do mess up, you'll have that spare sitting aside and you'll really thank yourself for doing so. Okay, I've got one side cut down. That will be the table side. And I did cut the tab off of that because I won't be needing it on that side of the chair. This side still has the tab, and I'm just going to go ahead and glue these two pieces together like so. And I'm just going to use tacky glue for this. I was careful not to get glue in this corner part where the tab is because I'm going to need to glue that in place later on. So I made sure to keep that clear of glue. And I'm just going to hold these two pieces together until they attach really well, cleaning off any excess glue and just lining them up to make sure that they're nice and even and they look like one whole piece. I'm not going to worry about that seam right there because I'm going to create an additional piece that will lay on top that will be hiding underneath. The second piece will also strengthen the bond between these two pieces. So now that I have my one whole piece, I can go ahead and trace that on a bigger sheet of mat board and then begin to carefully cut it out with my craft knife. So I'm just being super careful about this. And I am cutting from the outside of the pieces, not from the inside. You might want to make sure when you're cutting pieces with mat board, no matter what it is, that you're cutting on the outside of the piece that you want. So if you make a mistake or if you accidentally cut off of your path, you won't be cutting into your piece. Okay, my piece is cut and I'm just going to cut the corner and round it off just a little bit to match the original seat of the chair. Once I got my corners rounded, I'm going to help it out with a little bit of sanding. You can sand mat board, you can sand these kits, but you have to do so with caution and very lightly. Right now I'm using the finer side, the finer grit of my nail file. The two match pretty well. I'm going to glue them together. I'm just going to lay the new piece on top of the old piece and use my tacky glue to seal them together. Okay, I'm using a toothpick to spread the tacky glue evenly. I want to make sure I'm getting all the way to the edges around the whole piece. So this helps pretty well to create a nice even layer. And then I'm just going to attach the two together and press them down nice and tightly. And I'm also going to hold them for a few seconds just to make sure they're adjusted, they're all lined up and even. Remove any excess glue. And I would not suggest using clips to hold your pieces down when you're working with mat board because the clips can tend to leave permanent impressions that you're not going to want in your piece. So my suggestion is just to weigh them down with something heavy and something that's going to cover the whole thing so that there's no impression marks. So some sort of book. I like to tip my if I have full bottles of Mod Podge or paint, I like to tip them upside down so that the bigger lid is, it's nice and flat. It'll just press it down real nice and put a good amount of pressure on them when they're full. Or you can put some books. If you have 1, 2, 3 blocks, of course, you know what to do with those. Okay, so I'm going to take one of the front legs and just trace them out to create another set so that I can have a matching pair for each side. Okay, so I got my legs cut out. There's going to be 2 layers for each set of legs, and normally they would go in the front, but I'm going to need them to go on the side, kind of like this. Since I made new legs, I won't be needing the legs that are attached to the back, so I'm going to cut them off, but I'm making sure to leave that bottom bar attached because that's where the tab is going to sit and rest, and I'm going to need that support. So I've got both of these pieces ready to be glued together. The bench seat will sit in place like so, and then I can go ahead and add my new legs to each side, something like this. So I've got a pretty good head start. Now comes the brain work where I need to figure out how I'm going to make that table, and underneath the table is a shelf. Here are some reference photos of some of the gossip chairs that I found. These ones are all the same style. You can see that they have a cubby shelf underneath the table, and then there's a bottom shelf. I like this style, so I'm going to try to go for something like this. Okay, now I have all my parts cut out and prepped. I'm going to go ahead and glue the sets together, and that should make it a little bit easier to figure out what I need to do next. Okay, in order to make the table, I thought it would be easier if I just traced out a template of the side of the bench that the table is going to sit on. This way I know exactly how much space I'm working with and try to keep that table as accurate as possible. So I've got a template of the side of the bench that the table is going to be on, and I'm actually going to draw the table in the space of that template. Okay, here are the two pieces that are going to create my table. There's a top table and then there's a bottom piece, and these two will create a cubby. And I'm assuming that's where you would put your phone book or address book or maybe a notepad with a pencil. That's where Margot will be storing hers. Okay, so right now I'm just going to cut out some pieces that I'll be using for the side panels. So there are three sides to the table, and then there's a top piece and a bottom piece, and all those parts will create the cubby. I'm only going to use single layers of mat board for each piece because they'll all be supported with each other and they should stay put pretty well. I don't want the tabletop to be too thick, so I'm just going to keep it at a single layer. The front panel of the table has sort of like an S shape to it, so I'm just using the nail file just to try and file that a little more smoothly. Okay, before trying to construct the table and putting that together, I'm going to put the body of this chair together. And I'm using tacky glue. Tiny friends, when you're working with mat board, all you really need is tacky glue. I mean, it's bonds really well, it grips fast, it holds tightly, and because the mat board is a paper product, it's really the only kind of glue you need to use on mat board. So your basic white PVA glue is going to be strong enough for your pieces, and it's just going to be a great companion for it. So you really don't need to use more expensive glues like super glue, or you don't need to use hot glue. If your PVA glue is on the thinner side, just let it sit out on some cardstock or some scrap paper just for a few minutes to tack up real good, and it'll stick really quickly and bond really well. Okay, so I went ahead and put the table parts together, and I was able to actually get the legs to set in a way where it looks just like the picture, where you can see the full front piece of the leg. And I was really happy with the way that looked, because it was very similar to the original gossip chair in the reference photos. But however, when I went to go put the table on to the chair, the back leg was hanging off the back of the chair. So it was not fitting. It was like it was almost too long, but the table lined up, but the leg placement didn't line up. So I did try several other solutions, and in the end had to resort to going back to the drawing board and starting all over again. And this is where the brain work begins to hurt. Okay, so I'm going to take a break from that and create the front support panel that will sit in the front of the chair. Originally, I thought I would be able to use the two side support panels that came with the kit. If I were to cut them down too much on either side, it would start to interfere with the design. So what I did was measure how long the front of the chair was, and then I just used these two panels that came with the kit as kind of like a template or a guide, where I was able to trace them out and put them in a way where I could create the same design only with one whole piece. The chair didn't need the support, but it completes the design. Okay, so here I am going in for a second round on the table. And sometimes, tiny friends, when you're trying to create a miniature vision that you have and you're working completely from scratch, or cutting these pieces or trying to build it by hand without any machines or programs cutting the pieces out, sometimes in order to get that miniature to work, you have to modify the design a little bit. So I decided to try cutting holes in the table panel because both of the table panels are the same size. I didn't shorten them. I just had to move the legs in a little bit more, and this created a bottom ledge where the original piece and the first piece I made didn't have that bottom ledge. The front side panel was pushed up right along the bottom, so there was no ledge like the picture. And at first I thought, maybe I was just settling. Maybe I should push harder to try and get that design that I was going for originally. But in the end, I felt like it was perfectly okay. It is perfectly okay, tiny friends, if you can't get that exact design that you're going for, because sometimes in miniature form, it's more difficult to get to that point, especially when we're creating with our hands and doing all the cutting on our own and using our own brain instead of a program. Sometimes it does have to be modified in order for it to work. So in the end, this table ends up having a slightly different design than what I originally planned or what the real table looks like, but you'll see that it all works out and I'm still completely happy with the make. I guess at this point I could have cut off the excess ledge on the bottom panel while I was creating these holes, but I really didn't want to take the risk. So I just slid it up, put the legs through the holes, and decided to keep it that way. So now the bottom part does have a little bit of a ledge to it, whereas the first piece that I created and the original chair doesn't have a ledge around the bottom part of the table. What I really just wanted you to take from this was that if you are building something from scratch, if you're trying to go for a specific design or vision that you have in your head, don't be so hard on yourself and give yourself room for minor adjustments. This was a minor adjustment. It didn't really shift the design. It just added a little more of a detail to it. And it's just slightly different. So just be okay with that, because when you're creating something from scratch, especially in miniature form, sometimes the new plan has to be modified a little slightly from your original idea. And I just want you to be okay with that. Just know that sometimes, it just has to work out that way for it to work. One of the greatest things about this craft is that it's always, always, always a learning process. You're always going to be learning, and you're going to learn what works and what doesn't work. And then you're going to take that with you. And you may actually be surprised at how much you really end up loving your piece in the end. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind if you ended up getting discouraged, which happens to the best of us. And it's probably going to happen more than once. So just don't be disappointed if you do come across a situation like this while you're creating a miniature vision. So it's okay to remind yourself of these things. I know this is exactly what I had to tell myself while I was working on this, and it helped me push through to the end. Okay, so this part is finished. The chair is completely assembled. I'm going to skip ahead a couple steps and come back to do the cushion. Right now, I'm going to add the 2 toothpicks for the support bars. I'm going to glue the 2 card pieces together for the backboard of the cushion, and I'm going to give this 2 layers of acrylic paint for the base coat, which will be the cinnamon, of course, the cinnamon shade by Folk Art. Okay, while the chair is drying, it's a perfect time to assemble the cushion. And I've taken my little cardstock backboard and I've got my quilt batting. I'm going to glue the batting onto the cardstock first with tacky glue before trimming it down. This way I'll have an exact piece that fits the backboard. And once that piece is attached, I'm going to create a smaller piece. I want the cushion to kind of have a rounder shape on the top, almost kind of like a dome. So I'm just applying a smaller piece than the first one. Okay, choosing fabric is always the hardest part. I'm going to go with this pretty piece I found at a thrift store. It has beautiful lace trimming and it also has an embroidered design on it. And I'm going to choose that small blue flower, and it's barely going to fit, so I have to be super careful when cutting this out because that flower sits right along the edge, almost on the seam. So I'm going to trim this down. And I chose to go with this piece because it reminded me of one of the chairs in the photos I was referencing. So since it's such a tight little fit, I'm just trying to line it up and see if I can get the flower in the middle as best as I can before actually committing to gluing this piece down. I think it's going to work, so I'm just going to snip around the corners. So I'm going to make 2 snips on each side, right around the corners. My upholstery skills are not quite pro status, so I'm just going to try and do the best I can with this. I'm going to use my fabric tack and I'm going to glue all the sides down first before the corners, and this way I can pull them nice and tight. But I'm holding the cushion down with my fingers and I'm putting some pressure on it, and this will help keep that fabric from shifting on me so that the flower can stay exactly where I want it to sit. So after I get these sides tightly pulled over, I'll go back in and pull in the corners, and then I'll just manipulate any pieces I need to smooth down while the glue is still wet. Okay, so now I need to tone down that stark white. So I'm just using some of the dirty paint water. I've only used one color, so it's just more like a cloudy cinnamon shade. And I'm just brushing it around the edges and in through the middle just to tone it down just a little more. I am going in with the antique wax on this as well, but this time I'm going to keep it super light. I don't want it to take away from the base color. I don't want the antique wax to be the dominating color. I just want to apply it for some texture and added depth. The antique wax will dry a little bit darker than what it looks like wet, so I'm trying to be very careful with this. Usually I go in as a full layer, and this time I'm just going to try to apply it lightly and just have a hint of it. I'm going in with my black chalk pastels next to give it some shadowing and aging. This is going to darken the piece up a lot. So that's also one of the reasons why I went lightly on the antique wax. Okay, so I'm going to coat it with some hairspray, and it's going to do a couple things. It's going to lock in and seal the chalk pastels so that it doesn't rub off over the years. And then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry completely. And I'm going to bring it back out once it's completely dried, and the hairspray is going to help protect the mat board because I'm going to start to sand it down and wear down some of this staining to make it look like it's well used and it's pretty old. So the hairspray will help the mat board from getting torn apart. Okay, tiny friends, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Um, I'll be making some accessories for this piece in a separate video. I do have a couple phones, but they're not quite the style that I'm going for, so I'm probably going to try to create a phone out of polymer clay along with some added accessories for this table. If you've enjoyed this video today, don't forget to click that like button and give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought about this piece in the comments below. If you haven't tried a Bentley House Minis kit yet, I hope that I have inspired you to do so. Thank you all for joining me today. I want to welcome all my new subscribers and welcome back if you have already subscribed and you're joining in today. Until next time, tiny friends, you all have a lovely day and I will see you all on the mini side. Bye-bye. This is real life in the workspace. Kiwi, did you make this mess? You're gonna have to clean it up. My brain hurts. If only you had a kit, Ara. I wouldn't have to use my brain. Who made this mess? Kiwi, did you steal my other piece? Seriously, Bird, we're gonna have a talk about this. Here it is. Okay, so I've cut them down. I'm going to glue them together. I've cut one tab off. I've left one tab because I'll only need... Why does it look like I didn't cut that tab off? Did I cut that tab? I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, I better watch some of this first. How do I want to say this? Oh my god. Do I have to clean this up?